many years being used by those who are disgruntled in South Africa to register their grievances. Communities often barricade streets and burn tires in an attempt to get attention from the government for services. This has also led to the destruction of important infrastructure, further fueling instability in communities. Well, joining us now to talk about the relevance of protests for change is Professor Sinwell, Project Coordinator at the Center for Sociological Research and Practice at the University of Johannesburg. Prof, good to have you. Thank you very much for coming on. Has protests now increasingly, I mean, it's always been, but become even more a meaningful way for poor communities to be heard in South Africa?
Yeah, well, they have become a more meaningful way for people to be heard because the formal mechanisms for democracy, the institutions, the protocols for local democracy, participatory democracy, for ward committees, integrated development plans, development forums have failed communities, and communities knock on the door of councillors, mayors, Joburg Water, every official that they can get a hold of for years, as is the case in Westbury, but they don't get a response. Then they go to the streets on Wednesday. By Thursday, they occupy the roads. They say people can't go to work. By Thursday, the mayor has come in and said, you've been struggling for 7 years or 6 years, but now we are going to make sure that you get water, even if it means, he says, even if it means we cut off other areas. They have promised to resolve the water crisis within 1 week. So essentially, the government's reactive response to protest, instead of collaborating with communities, it means that they teach communities and they teach us that protest is possibly the only means by which you will be heard if you're from a community that lacks access to basic services.
So talk to me about these other platforms, ward meetings. Are they still happening, right? Do actually ward councillors go have these ward meetings where communities and residents can come and air their grievances? 2, IDPs. I mean, at some point in the city of Johannesburg, I think one of the councillors was wrapped around the knuckle by the speaker to say, you have not attended one IDP meeting since you were in office, and all these other forums. Are they there? Do they just sit and nothing happens, or are they not sitting at all?
The way you're talking about it is how I understand it, Thabo. I mean, there would be a diverse range of different engagements that are happening with communities, although largely there is a sense within townships and informal settlements in particular, but also poor communities, that they're just not working, that we can't meet with the councillor. I mean, the national dialogue is arguably, I would argue, is an attempt, the president has said, it's an attempt at ensuring we hear the voices of ordinary people. To me, it's a recognition that we are not listening to the people or that we can't hear them. The problem with that is that it's not necessarily going to solve the crisis in communities, because it is largely due to infrastructure, but also due to the cost recovery policies that are being implemented by the government of national unity.
Yeah. So does that, Prof, then represent a failure in the democratic system? So can we blame that and say, well, that means this democracy system doesn't work because people vote, people go to these formal engagements platforms, they are still ignored. So is democracy failing the poor, and therefore there needs to be a relook at that system, maybe come up with something else?
I mean, undoubtedly, it's failing the poor. Unless you associate democracy only with voting every 4 or 5 years or in every municipal election, undoubtedly, the vast majority of people living in primarily working class, black, colored, and Indian communities do not have a voice. So the Reconstruction and Development Program was meant to empower ordinary people to take control over their lives and to have access to the basic things that they need to survive. But instead of that, we got gear, cost recovery, and exclusion. And when people stand up actually in communities, well, they do get delivery, as we've seen in Westbury, but they also, that's the carrot, but they also get the stick. They get the rubber bullets. They get fired at and shot. It's a carrot and stick approach. It's a reformist approach by a government that is clinging onto power 30 years into democracy when it hasn't been able to deliver.
Yeah. So how do we do an alternative? What alternative that will genuinely work? Because, I mean, if you look at protests, they span across, I suppose, all provinces, even in provinces that are not ANC run, or municipalities that are not run by the ANC, wherever there's dissatisfaction in terms of service delivery, there will be protests. Others have suggested that, well, one of the things that needs to happen is actually cut the provincial sphere of government. It's not doing anything really, because ultimately national has got to come down and solve some of these problems. So just cut it out and have the national and the local, and you'll have better, I suppose, control in terms of having a purview of what's happening at local level.
The main disconnect that is happening is with the local level. It could be the local government level, but I'm talking about with the communities, with the civic organizations, with the people who are affected by the everyday experience of water crisis. So people's voices are not being heard. We need a deeper connection between communities and local government.
Prof, appreciate your time. Let's leave it there for this afternoon. That's Professor Luke Sinwell, project coordinator there at the Center for Sociological Research and Practice at the University of Johannesburg.